Morning,
All the cows down here?
Yeah, well, it's that time of year
Yeah.
where everyone thins out, people go away. What happened to Doug? Is he back?
Douglas seems way back. I think he's doing duck. He's doing duck since.
Okay, all right. Maybe when we finish this safer, we'll have to think about what we want to do next. I think we've sort of exhausted Choshen Mishpat, so we may want to change subjects completely. I know you had sent me a safer that you were interested in
Yeah.
doing.
Typical.
Eish Kodesh. That's Chassidus. I'm 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 debating whether we should do another something else halachic or because it is in the morning. But our minds are supposed to be alert. Yeah. Okay. So next she'ela. Shutvin shahaisa lahem sechora ve'echad mehashutvin ratza lahamtin v'limkor es haperos ad zman hayadua kegon b'nisan o b'tishrei. So two partners have merchandise. One of the partners wants to wait to sell the merchandise at a well-known time, such as in Nisan or Tishrei, meaning in the spring or the fall, when it's known that this is a good time to sell this commodity. It's the right time to sell this particular merchandise or this particular kind of produce. מה הדין כשיש לפני השותפים קונה שמוכן לקנות את אותם פירות לפני זמן הידוע, כגון באדר או באלול? What if the partners encounter an opportunity to find a buyer who is willing to purchase the merchandise before the normal time? So let's say a month early. Let's say instead of Nisan or Tishrei, Adar or Elul. Okay? האם חברו השותף השני יכול לחייבו ולמנוע מלהמתין עד לזמן הידוע? Is the other partner, or can one of the partners obligate him to wait until the normal time? ויש למכור את הסחורה לקונה זה שבא לפנינו עכשיו. Or, no, sorry, can one partner coerce the other partner to not delay the sale and to sell it to the guy who's right in front of them now? In other words, this is, I guess, one example of how do partners resolve making changes in the normal operation of their business. Okay. In other words, one of the partners says, we have this opportunity now. Maybe the guy is willing to offer less, but he's a guaranteed buyer, so we should go with him. And the other partner says, no, I'd rather wait and get the better price when this thing is going to fetch a higher price, even though it's not a solid guarantee. I'm willing to wait and to gamble, right? So it's a conflict between two partners. So how does halacha decide these kinds of conflicts? So the answer is tshuva. Im echad mehashutvin rotze lahamtin milimkor et haschora azman hayadua shehu zman haragil limkor et otam haperot. If one of the partners wants to wait from selling the merchandise until the established time of when it's normal to sell this merchandise. He says the other fellow cannot coerce him and to not wait. Mikeven sheregilus shahashar bizman hu aperos imkarm b'mechir yoser gavoa v'achshav mechir aperos namoch. And the reason is, as I surmised from the question, that if they sell it now, it'll fetch a lower price. The higher price is when you take it to the particular market where you anticipate it's going to go for more. Like let's say in today's commercial world, we can wait until Black Friday to sell this merchandise, or we can sell it earlier but at a lower price. You wait till Black Friday to put it on sale, you're going to have a lot more buyers. Okay, even though they advertise that it's at a discount, it's usually not. They jack up the price and then they say, 15% off or whatever it is. Aval mishehegia zman hamecher yachol kol echad limkor ve'ein chavero yachol limnoa ula'akev alav. But once the standard time for selling this item has arrived, then either partner can bring it to market and start selling it, and the other partner can't tell him to wait. Okay, v'imochar below das chavero v'nisyaker achar kach ein lechavero alav klum. And so if we go to market on Black Friday, and one of the partners says, no, we shouldn't sell it on Black Friday. There's going to be too many competitors. I'd rather wait until January to sell this item because I think we'll be able to get a better price then. He doesn't have a right to say that. Okay. The imein zman yadua limkar lo peros. Now, that's when there's a normative time to sell the product. What if there is no normative time to sell the product? What if this is a perennial and it's sold around the calendar year? But for whatever reason, one of the partners wants to wait. Okay. So then either partner has a right to unilaterally find a customer to purchase these goods because you can't, just because you're a partner doesn't mean that you have a right to prevent us from selling our merchandise. Okay. And even though it becomes clear that the price may go up, if we end up waiting, and even if, let's say, I wanted to sell it in December, and my friend wants to wait to sell it until January, since there's no fixed time for this merchandise to be sold, there's no normative time for it to be sold. My partner does not have a right to prevent me from moving ahead with the sale, even if it turns out that he was right, that the price went up in January. He has no legal right to say, well, you have to pay the difference that we could have gotten for that merchandise if you had listened to me and we had waited.
These are partners 50-50 ownership.
Yeah, that's assuming that they're 50-50 partners. Okay. So what is the basis of this halacha? So it's a Gemara in Gittin. Tanya Rebbe Yehuda Omer Begimel Prakim Mochen Asatvua. There are 3 times in the year when wheat is sold, and I guess this was the standard in the Middle East in the times of the Gemara. Okay, Lifnei Hazera, Uvisha'as Hazera, Uviprosa Pesach. So people sell before they seed the fields. They sell wheat. People sell wheat while they're planting the new crops, and people sell 2 weeks before Pesach. Uvishlosha prakim mochen esayayin. There are 3 standard times when people sell wine: v'pros haPesach, uvipros atzeres, uvipros hachag. Pros usually means 2 weeks before because it's half a month. That's what pros means. A half a month before Pesach, a half a month before Shavuos, and a half a month before Sukkot. And why do people buy wine then? Well, you know the reason, because that's when you have Yantiv. So people want wine. Okay. I buy usually like 2 cases of wine twice a year, once before Rosh Hashanah and once before Pesach. That's when people buy their wine. So the shemen.
You have enough left for Purim.
Yeah, that's true. People usually bring bottles of wine. The shemen me atzeres va'elach. And when do people buy oil? So that's the 3rd commodity that's discussed by the Gemara. People typically buy oil from Shavuos onwards. Okay, uvi Gemara sham shoalim l'may hilchasa. The Gemara asks, what difference does it make what time of year people buy different commodities? Like, why is the Gemara providing us with this information? So Amar Rava v'itema Rav Papa l'shutfin. So the rabbis explain it's for when there's partnership. And Rashi explains, l'shutfin sheina echad yachol limkar shalom midas chaveru chutz leprakim halalu. What that means is that if there's partners in a business, no partner has a right to unilaterally sell outside of those times when the commodity is being sold, because you're invariably going to be getting a lower price. Avol biprakim halalu ein tzarich lihi malech, but during these periods, you don't have to consult with your other partners. If you find a customer, you can just sell to him. V'imochar v'nisyaker hashar la'achar zman ein alav klum. So therefore, if you sell during one of these periods, and then later on the price of this commodity goes up, and one of the partners complains and says, "You knucklehead, why didn't you wait? We could have gotten more money for this commodity." He has no claim because your answer is, because I sold it when I was supposed to sell it. That's the normative time to sell. Okay. Anyway, so that's the source for this in the Gemara. And then he brings the opinion of Tosfos, then he brings the opinion of Rashi, and then he brings the psak of the Rambam, and the Shulchan Aruch. Okay. But that's, as you can see, that's the background. Right, so let us go on. Okay. Next, Shutav Shemocher es haschora below yedias chavero. A partner who sells merchandise without first consulting with his partner. So here's the shaila. Shutvim shahaisa lahem schora sheyesh lo zman yadua lemechirasa. There's partners. It's a very similar shaila. They have merchandise that has a normative time to sell it. Ein hashutaf hasheni yochel limnoa mimenu milahamtin. He says the one partner cannot prevent him from waiting. In other words, if I want to sell it during the normative time, you can't stop me from selling it. Vahatam regilos shahashar bizmanahu yoser gavoa. Because normally, since that's the normative time to sell this commodity, that's when it'll fetch the highest price. V'yesh lachkor. So then the question now is, mahadin kishemocher es haschara mebli yedias hashutaf echad kodem zman hayadu lemechirasa. What if one of the partners unilaterally sells the product before the normative time? Okay. Hayim yesh kan pshia mitzad hashutaf v'chayv l'shalom lo es ma she'hefsid l'chaveru b'mechirazu. So the question is, can one of the partners sue the other partner in Beis Din for having sold it at the wrong time? That's the question. In other words, what legal recourse is there after the fact? So in a business partnership like that, I imagine the law would address this kind of business conflict in a business when one partner accuses the other partner of mismanagement of the company.
If he doesn't play by the rules of the game, that there'd be implied obligations.
Yeah. So he's
Makes a profit.
right, right. Yeah. So the answer is im mocher hashutaf es haschora membli yedias chavero kodem azman hayadu lemechirasa yesh kan peshia. So if it was sold at the wrong time, before the normative time for selling the commodity has arrived, then this is an act of negligence. Ve'im nisyaker haschora la'achar hamachira chayev l'shalim l'shutfo es ma she'hifsid b'mechira zu kodem zmana. And if in fact the commodity goes up in value, then that partner who sold it unilaterally will have to pay his partner the loss. In other words, whatever we could have gotten subtracted from what we actually got, I have to pay you for your share of what you would have made if I would have waited. Okay, and that seems to be pretty straightforward as a product of what we said. Okay. Oh, so he then he says ve'eish la'ayin shutfim shahaya lehem pardes esrogim o shekanu esrogim zman tuva lifnei rosh chodesh elo. So he says, let's look at a real case. You have two partners who own an orchard of esrogim, which is a very common business in Israel. Okay, they or they don't own an orchard, but they purchased a whole shipload of esrogim a significant time before Rosh Chodesh Elul. When do people start typically purchasing their esrogim?
Afterwards.
Certainly after Rosh Chodesh Elul, usually a week before Rosh Hashanah is when people would typically start buying, start thinking about buying. So these two guys purchased a shipload of esrogim, and one of the partners decided he was going to unload it on somebody else. So he sells the entire shipment of esrogim to a third party without consulting his partner. Kamos shel esrogim b'mechir kach v'kach. Like, 1,000 esrogim for a fixed price. V'achar kach yisbarer sheyesh choser shel esrogim v'nimkarim b'mechir gavo mima shemachar oso shutaf lifnei zman mechiras esrogim b'shuk. And then it's discovered, like a week later or a day later, that there's a huge shortage of esrogim this year. And if you would have waited, we could have sold this to market, brought this to market and made a killing.
But at that time, he did not, nobody knew.
Yeah, maybe
nobody
knew, but he shouldn't have sold it without consulting his partner. Okay, lichora
They bought it together. I mean, they should sell it together.
Yeah. Yeah, I could be, could be one of the guys, my friend went away and I can't get his number. And I have this guy who just gave me the opportunity. He'll take the whole shipment off my hands. There won't be any risk. There won't be any labor. And we can make a profit, right? So then,
Rabbi, was that the original intention when they?
It seemed like a good idea at the
Of course,
time.
that they always say that.
Yeah.
But was the original intention of the partners to buy it and then resell it as a shipment?
Yeah. No, their intention was, let's sell this and make a profit. That's the implication is we'll sell each esrog privately.
Right.
And
Okay,
that
well,
will
that
make,
goes against the
you know,
original intention. that's for
it
sure.
goes against the business plan, sure, as far, so that's the idea that we're discussing here. The business plan is that's what the Gemara says. You normally sell wine 2 weeks before Pesach.
Right, okay.
You don't sell it in February. That's not when you sell wine. So here's the same thing, okay? So he says, L'chora mikri pshia, v'chayev lefatzos es chavero b'mesha hifsid. So it seems that this would be a classic case of where the partner who acted unilaterally would have to figure out how much profit he denied from his partner and would have to compensate him or at least get his forgiveness.
It probably have to be compared to the piecemeal sale rather than how much they could have sold as a shipment.
Yeah,
Subsequently.
yeah,
But I'm
but-
curious about Murph's question earlier. What if the price went down? There was a glut. And so he was successful in selling it when he did. Does he have to share? I presume he shares the profits.
Yeah, he would have to share the profits because the merchandise belongs to both of them.
Right,
So whatever he sells it for, he has to share.
right. So when he goes against the rules, he has to share the whole upside, but would not
Right.
have to sort of.
Right.
share the
Now,
loss.
listen, it could also be that a week after the guy sells it, they discover a glut and he could have sold it as a whole shipment also at a much higher price. We don't know. All we know is from the question that he's asking is the partners decided, let's buy a shipload of esrogim. Either we'll figure out some way to make a profit off of it. And before they could even, take action, one of the partners unilaterally unloaded it on somebody else. And then a day later, they discover, wow, the price of esrogim has shot up. Okay. So this seems to be a pshia, a negligent act on behalf of that one partner. Ela lichora haidina havitalia imachar kishehesrogim hayuadayin be'etzim v'choser ha'esrogim mishum shalaku ha'esrogim kishahayu b'mechuber. So he says, however, I think it would depend whether the esrogim that we just purchased, is it a shipment of esrogim that have already been harvested, or is it esrogim in an orchard that are already attached to the tree? Because he says, if the one partner who did the unilateral sale did so when the estrogim were still in the orchard, and the reason why estrogim are now so rare is because there was some kind of tree disease, a blight, that caused the estrogim of this year to many of them to shrivel or to become spoiled. Matzi Amarle Havi Hashta Lididan Hatzola Lerov Esrogim Sheitachin Achar Kach Es Amachir Hazeh Gamkin Lo Yinu Mekablim. Then maybe the partner who unilaterally sold it could say, I actually did us a favor, because if we would have held on to these esrogim that are still in the orchard, they would have also become sickly and we would have lost our whole investment. Okay? והגם שנמכרים הסרוגים במחיר גבוה והיינו מוצאים רק מיעוט מעודרים ובזה וכיסה על זה ואם כן לא שייך לחייבה. He says, and even though you could argue that we could have gotten a lot of money for a smaller amount of esrogim, he says, he could still say, but I wanted to save us from the possibility of getting wiped out, because there's no way that you and I could possibly know whether our whole crop would get wiped out, whether we would be able to save some and make a profit, but there was no way for us to know. He says, so in that case, it's not so clear that the partner who unilaterally sold them prematurely would be able to be sued by his other partner. Because in that case, the guy could say, how do you know how many of our esrogim would have survived? But if he sold them as a shipload of esrogim that are already that have already been harvested and are in boxes, so then I agree, there would be a legal case against the guy who unilaterally sold them. Here's another case, he says, in the clothing business. So you have partners who own a consortium of winter coats, okay? So sveterim or sweaters, which is basically winter attire, okay? Uba echad min hakonim v'rotze kamos liknos k'shahaya zezman kayetz. A buyer comes along and he says, I'd like to take all of these winter coats off your hand, but he comes in June, okay? So basically he's coming or I don't know, when would be the right, or maybe in March.
Way too early, because you're thinking of the next winter.
Yeah, right. So maybe he's coming in March, and he says, I want to buy all of these coats, when in reality, if they would wait until they could bring it to market, they could sell the coats for much more. And the one of the partners unilaterally sells the coats to this guy, where he could have, if he would have waited, he could have fetched a much higher price if he would have sold it, let's say, in the fall. Okay, Oh, havi mikri legabe osam habegadim ein zman yadua limkor beprat geshnosim lemakamos hakarim v'tzarachiyim. Or, so he says, on the one hand, you could argue there is a normative time to sell these coats, which is in the fall. On the other hand, you could say, maybe because coats are a commodity that stays, it doesn't spoil, and it's a commodity that you could sell year round. Maybe one of the partner who did the unilateral sale maybe would not be held liable, because he could argue, I was buying winter coats for when it's winter in Australia.
It's never winter in Australia.
Well, people don't wear winter coats in Australia. Never.
What's a winter coat? Like, this is a winter coat. Guarantee is none of these in Australia.
Okay. Well, so then maybe not Australia. What about Argentina or something like that?
Probably.
I mean, there's got to be for South Africa. What is What's the situation? And anyone know what South Africa's like?
Or these codes could be anyways held for the following year. It's not like something that can't be
It's,
sold.
it's not
It's
perishable,
not time sensitive.
right?
What about style changes? Every year,
No,
no?
no codes.
No?
So once again, it depends on the commodity.
Or you made a mistake of buying fur coats, which my dad, bless him, many of us did that. He bought a whole bunch and then people went away from fur coats. He got stuck with a lot of stuff.
Really?
Can you get it away?
No kidding. People don't buy fur anymore, do they?
Was not, oh, anti-fur.
I think it's coming back.
Really?
Real fur's coming back. I think those environmentalists or the faux fur guys or whatever, they disappeared. That's what somebody was saying. Some lady wore a fur coat.
Oh, because they're fighting for free Palestine now.
Right. That other thing's on. The first bat.
Okay.
So a lot of this is talking about, it's my business all the time, is you have all the information in front of you at that time and you made a decision. And you can't predict certain things, for example, Trump tariff war, tantrum. Before that market's up strong and then make some decisions for a client and the client, then boom, no way could have noticed everything and figured that out and boom, you're down 15% within
Yeah.
4 days.
Right.
But at that time, I made the right decision. The client said, well, we should have known that was gonna happen, like, give me a break. So, but I assume that part of all the information, I do a rule of thumb is, especially in a senior, if I make an investment decision, and then if there's a complaint or if it goes down, I'm in front of a judge, can I justify what I did? That's how I do my stuff.
Yeah, right. I mean, I agree with you. When you're dealing with partners, I guess the best advice would be don't take action until you and your partner are on the same page, and that way you won't have to deal with these kinds of shilas.
Also, it's hard to prove negligence. It's that standard of reasonableness, which means in all the circumstances that you fall below a reasonably proven person. So,
Right.
right, it's very contextual.
Yeah. Okay. So, let's
It's
see.
a lot of business is more black and white, I guess.
Well,
Yeah.
it's not so much.
Well,
That's.
but not like the rabbit business, that's all black and white.
Um, let's see. Okay. All right, so we'll go on. The next siman is dealing with kiyum hashlichus v'hachazar mishamar lechavero, so fulfilling the proxyship. Someone said to his friend, Reuven kanaschora zu shenimtzeis eitzel Levi, that Reuven has just purchased merchandise that is in now Levi's possession. V'ani eshtatef imcha v'halach v'kana. Okay. So a guy says to his friend, it's very poorly worded. Okay, the comma is misplaced. Misha Amar lechavero Ruvain. A guy says to his friend Ruvain. Okay, so Shimon says to Ruvain, and he says to him, Kanes chorazushin nimtzeit eitzel Levi. Ruvain, please go ahead. Let's buy. Levi has a commodity. Let's buy his merchandise, and you and I will be partners in selling it. Vani eshtatef imcha, and I'll be your partner, and we'll purchase it together, and we'll sell it together. V'holach v'kana. So Reuven goes ahead and he purchases the merchandise. Ha'im Shimon ha'mishaleach yochol yischarit v'lachzabo me'ashut v'sim Reuven. Can Shimon after the fact say, I've had a change of heart and I've decided that I really don't want to do this business deal anymore. And Reuven says, well, I already bought the goods. I laid out the cash. How can you say that you don't want to do the venture anymore? Oh, Kaven Shekiyem Shlichusa in Yachol. In other words, this was Shimon gave a verbal commitment to Reuven. saying that I'll be your partner. Go and buy the merchandise from Levi. You lay out the money. I'll owe you the money, etc. And then now Shimon wants to back out. No way. There was no legal contract.
I think there.
It was just a verbal. It was just a verbal.
Secular law. You
Yeah.
verbally agree, and the guy relied on it, and he went ahead and, incurred some expense, and I think he's stuck.
So Shimon is still on the hook. Okay, we'll deal with this Shaila tomorrow. How's that? Happy Hanukkah, everybody.